I have worked in law enforcement long enough to know that fear rarely enters a station through the front door. It slips in quietly, through stories, rumors, the unknown things people bring with them. And on that evening in rural Utah, fear entered wearing the face of a man who walked calmly between two deputies as though he were simply stepping out for an evening stroll. It was around 8 when they brought him in. The sun had just dipped behind the canyon ridge, leaving the sky a bruised violet and the desert air cooling faster than seemed natural. I was finishing paperwork in the main room, and the station had that soft hum of silence you only get on slow nights. The kind where you almost begin to appreciate the quiet. Deputy Harris pushed through the door first, out of breath and flushed, which immediately told me something had rattled him. Behind him came Deputy Lane, gripping the arm of a man who did not look frightened, aggressive, confused, or intoxicated. He looked calm in a way that did not belong on a man being escorted into a police station. Lane spoke first. "Sheriff, we found him in the canyon. He scared a couple hikers half to death. Just walked up behind them and stared at them. Did not say a word." Harris stepped forward, and he kept following them even when they told him to stop. I closed my file and approached. "All right, let us take a look. Sir, you want to explain yourself." The man lifted his eyes to mine, and for a moment I felt something shift in the air between us. His gaze was neither hostile nor pleading. It was ancient in a way I could not name, weathered, knowing, as if he had already seen this moment long before it happened. He spoke softly. "I told them to stay away from me. I warned them. They did not listen." His voice had a cadence that made the hairs on my arms rise. Calm, steady, too controlled. Lane frowned. "That is not what they said." The man turned toward me again. "Sheriff, I need to be somewhere safe tonight. Somewhere no one else will be harmed." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you followed those hikers? To warn them?" He nodded once. "Yes. They came too close. I could not let them stay with me when the change begins." Harris exhaled sharply. "What change?" The man looked at him with a sorrow I did not expect. "The curse." Lane rolled his eyes, and Harris muttered something under his breath. I crossed my arms. "What curse are we talking about?" The man stepped forward slightly, though he remained completely calm in Lane's grip. "I am cursed to become something else under certain nights. A creature the old stories speak of. A thing that hunts. A thing that remembers. A skinwalker." For a moment the room was painfully silent. I looked from him to my deputies, waiting for someone to crack a smile or show a sign that this was a joke. But no one did, and maybe that was why I laughed. It was a short laugh, sharp and dismissive, the kind meant to break tension. But it did not change his expression. He did not react at all. He only blinked, slowly, as though my laughter meant less than dust to him. "All right," I said. "Let us get you in a cell for the night until we figure out what is going on." The man nodded. "But you will regret locking me away. The walls cannot keep it in, and you will feel it before anyone else." Harris tightened his grip. "That sounds like a threat." The man shook his head. "No, a warning." Lane scoffed. "Yeah, sure. Come on." We led him down the hallway to the cell block, which was little more than 2 reinforced cells and a metal door that groaned every time it opened. The air down there always felt a bit colder, but that night the temperature seemed to drop the deeper we went. It brushed against my skin like the first breath of winter. We placed him in the far cell, the one with the thick bars and the solid concrete back wall. He stepped inside willingly and sat near the center, his hands resting loosely on his knees. I locked the door and turned to leave, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the stillness in the way he sat. Maybe it was the faint sound of the wind outside shifting in a way that felt two-timed. Or maybe it was the strange sense that his eyes were on the back of my neck even though I had not turned around. I finally glanced over my shoulder. He was staring directly at me. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Before the moon reaches its height tonight, you will see the truth of what I am. And you will wish you had taken me seriously." A ripple of discomfort ran through me, but I forced myself to shake it off. "Get some rest," I said as casually as possible. "We will talk in the morning." His eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "There will be no morning like you expect." I left the cell block with Lane and Harris behind me. The door groaned shut, and Harris immediately exhaled in frustration. "Sheriff, that guy is not right. His eyes do not move like normal eyes." Lane nodded, and he did not blink for almost 30 seconds when we brought him in. I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of their fear starting to crawl under my own skin. "We have brought in stranger people. He is just tired, maybe on something, maybe scared of his own shadow." Harris shook his head. "Maybe, but something is off. Something feels wrong. You feel it too, do you not?" I did not answer because I did feel it. A mood in the station that did not belong. A heaviness in the walls. A quiet that seemed to deepen instead of fade. And then it began. A soft tapping sound coming from the cell block. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Like fingernails brushing slowly across metal. Lane froze. Harris stared down the hall. "Sheriff, is someone else back there?" I straightened, listening. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, steady, almost thoughtful. No wind could make that sound. No old pipe. No settling wall. I walked cautiously to the hallway entrance and stood still, listening as the tapping grew softer, then stopped altogether. When it stopped, something else started. Breathing. Not human breathing. Slow. Deep. Hungry. Rumbling. Harris stepped backward. "What is that?" I swallowed, unable to give him an answer. Unable to pretend I was not just as shaken. The cell block door creaked. Not opening. Not moving. Just settling under a pressure that should not have been possible from inside. Lane whispered, "Sheriff, tell me that door is locked." I nodded. "It is locked." But even as I said it, I felt dread slide down my spine. Because for the first time in my career, I was no longer certain that a locked door meant anything at all. And that was the moment the unease in the station grew into something else. The beginning of fear. Real fear. The kind that makes trained officers refuse to walk past a single cell ever again. Sleep was out of the question for everyone that night. Even the idea of sitting down felt wrong. The air in the station had grown heavier, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in a matter of minutes. It clung to the walls and floors like fog. Harris paced in tight circles near the front door, rubbing the back of his neck again and again. Lane tried to distract himself by reorganizing paperwork, but every few minutes he would look up sharply as if expecting someone to walk through the hall. The tapping had stopped, but silence was even worse. The kind of silence that stretches thin until it feels like something is about to tear through it. Finally I stood, unable to ignore the weight pressing on my chest. "I am going down there." Harris spun around. "Sheriff, no. Not alone." Lane set his papers down. "I am not letting you walk toward that thing by yourself." I raised a hand. "You both stay here. I need to talk to him again." Harris opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head as if trying to push away whatever instinct was screaming at him. "This is a bad idea. Everything happening tonight is a bad idea," Lane muttered. I forced a calm expression, even though my pulse was pounding. I stepped into the hallway. The moment I crossed that threshold, the air changed. Colder, denser. The lights flickered once, humming loudly as though straining under some unseen pressure. I walked slowly, the sound of my boots echoing down the corridor. The tapping had stopped, but I half expected it to return the closer I came to the cell. Instead, a different sound emerged, a faint rasp, like someone breathing through clenched teeth, mingled with a soft low hum that did not sound entirely human. When I reached the bars, the man was standing again. He stood near the back of the cell with his hands resting at his sides, his posture relaxed but too still, like he was waiting for something. He looked at me without blinking. "You feel it now." I swallowed. "Feel what?" "The curse." His voice had changed. It carried an echo that had no right being in that small cell. As if someone else spoke the words with him, just a fraction behind his tone. His breathing was deep, slow, measured. His eyes glinted in the dim light. Something in them was shifting. They no longer reflected the light the way normal eyes should. They absorbed it. I steadied my voice. "You have deputies scared out of their minds. Tell me exactly what is happening so I can help you." He tilted his head gently, an unnatural smooth movement that made the muscles in my arms tense. Help me. You think you are dealing with a man in need of help. Sheriff, something else lives in me now. Something ancient. I came here to warn you, to keep you and your people safe. Lane's words echoed in my memory. His eyes do not move like normal eyes. I inched closer to the bars. Explain the curse. His expression softened, but the softness felt wrong, like a mask trying to imitate human sorrow. When I was young, I walked without respect through a place that was not mine to walk. I heard a voice call my name from the mouth of the canyon, a voice that sounded like a friend. I followed. I should not have. His voice grew quieter. By the time I realized what had found me, it was too late. It offered me power, shape, freedom from the body that trapped it. I said no, but the curse took root. Promise I never agreed to. And ever since then, when the nights grow full, the thing inside me tries to take over. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. What is the thing inside you? He blinked slowly. A skinwalker, a creature that wears the shape of what it kills. A thing that was not meant to inhabit a human mind. His breathing grew heavier. Tonight the moon is strong, stronger than it has been in years. And the curse is tired of waiting. The lights flickered again, this time staying dim enough for shadows to stretch along the walls. Shadows that looked wrong. His shadow stretched toward the bars even though he had not moved an inch. I took an involuntary step back. What do you want from me? I asked quietly. He stepped forward, just one easy step, but the air thickened as though something massive had moved. To understand that when I begged you not to cage me, I was not protecting myself. He placed his hands on the bars. His fingers curled around the metal, and the faintest creak murmured from the steel. I was protecting you. The lights above us buzzed angrily, flickering in rapid pulses. I forced myself to breathe. Tell me something. Why now? Why come to town? Why let yourself be found? His voice was barely more than a whisper now, yet it carried through the hallway like a weight. Because the thing that controls the curse is tired of hiding. And it wants a place with walls. It wants to be confined. It wants to grow in the dark. Something twisted inside my stomach. His posture changed again. Not dramatically, not violently, just enough that I knew something beneath the surface was stretching, shifting, pressing to be let out. Behind me I heard footsteps. Sheriff. It was Lane, standing just far enough away that he thought the shadows could not reach him. I looked back. Go upstairs. Now. Lane hesitated. Sheriff, half the staff refuses to come near this hall. I am not letting you stay down here alone. The prisoner spoke softly. You should listen to him, Sheriff. Your people feel what you ignore. They sense what is coming. Then his voice shifted. Literally shifted. A second tone bled through his words. Deeper, resonant, vibrating against the metal bars like a low drum. I stepped back again, pulse racing. What was that? He smiled. It is waking. Lane flinched, taking a step back. What is waking? The man turned his eyes toward him, and in those eyes there was no longer fear. There was no longer man. Only hunger. The part of me that is not human. Lane muttered something under his breath and retreated into the hallway. The man stepped closer to the bars, his face half in shadow, half illuminated by the failing lights. You all laughed. You all mocked the idea of this curse. But you feel it now. Every one of you. The air thickening. The quiet growing. The shadows waiting. And tonight, none of your walls will hold me. I gripped the bars, my voice barely steady. What are you warning us about? He whispered. That you locked the wrong thing inside this cell. A deep rumble filled the room. Not from him. From the air itself. Like something buried in the concrete was shifting, stretching, preparing. My breath caught. Something moved behind him. A shape that was not his shape. A shadow that did not match his outline. A tall, thin figure rising along the wall as though pulling itself into our world from another. Lane screamed. I staggered backward. The man lowered his head. The moon is rising. And as he lifted his face again, his features were no longer entirely human. The transformation had begun. The moment his features began to shift, every instinct in my body screamed to get out of that hallway. For a second, I could not move at all. It felt as though the air had solidified, trapping me in place. The lights above us flickered violently, each pulse revealing a different version of the man behind the bars. Human 1 second, distorted the next. His shadow stretched and curled along the floor like something alive. I reached for my radio, but the static came through so loud I dropped it out of reflex. The noise echoed down the hall like a scream. Lane had already backed several steps away, pale and trembling. His hand gripping the handle of his holstered gun, though we both knew a weapon would be as useful as a paperweight. The prisoner's voice filled the hallway. "Sheriff." It was layered again, 2 tones merging into one, each syllable bending the air around us. I forced myself to step back until my shoulder hit the cold wall. "What is happening to you?" I demanded, though my voice barely held steady. He stepped forward, and the shift in his face became more pronounced. Bones moved beneath his skin in ways bones are not meant to move. His jawline sharpened, then softened, then elongated just enough to be wrong. His eyes pulled darker, the whites nearly swallowed. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. I swallowed hard. "Hear what?" "The moon." His mouth stretched into a slow, eerie smile that did not look human anymore. "It is calling to me." A deep rumble vibrated through the cell as though the concrete itself were responding. Something scraped across the floor inside. Not footsteps, something heavier. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the cell block so completely I could not even see my own hands. I heard Lane curse softly, his words shaking. Somewhere to my left, the cell bars groaned under pressure, metal twisting but not breaking. The cold deepened so fast I felt it pierce straight through my clothes. A new sound rose behind the bars. Not breathing, not growling. A rattling inhale like something dragging air through a shape that did not fit lungs anymore. I snapped my flashlight on. The beam flickered, then steadied. He was not where he had been. He stood mere inches from the bars, his face illuminated in the pale beam. For a heartbeat his features appeared normal again. A man's face, eyes reflecting the light. Then they changed. The pupils dilated until they filled nearly the whole eye. The skin around them rippled like water moving under a thin membrane. His lips pulled back in a slow, revealing grin that showed teeth too sharp, too long. Lane gasped behind me. "Sheriff, we have to get out. Now." I raised my voice. "Stay back from the bars. You stay back." The man tilted his head to one side, the movement too fluid, too smooth, as though something else controlled his body. Then his voice came again, deeper than before, resonating through the walls. "You locked me away believing it was safe." The lights above us blinked on for half a second, then burst with a sharp crack, plunging us back into darkness. Tiny shards rained onto the floor, glittering under the dim moonlight from the small window in the hall. Lane ran toward the exit. I stepped back slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. The beam caught something on the wall behind the prisoner. A shadow. But the shadow did not match his shape. It was taller, narrower, his head bent at a sharper angle. And as my light passed over it, the shadow moved independent of him. The prisoner exhaled, and the sound was cold as winter wind. "It is almost free." I felt the air shift. A sudden crack echoed from the bars. Not enough to break them, but enough to make them shudder. Enough to make me fear they would not hold much longer. I raised the flashlight again and watched in horror as the darkness behind him thickened. His silhouette wavered like smoke rising off a fire. His arms lengthened, then snapped back, the joints bending slightly in the wrong direction. "Stop it," I yelled. "Stop whatever you are doing." He blinked with both eyes at once, slower than human blinking. When he spoke, it was with that new voice that seemed to come from the very center of the room. "I told you the walls would not protect you." The cell shook once, then stopped, then shook again, stronger. Lane appeared at the far end of the hall, eyes wide. "Sheriff, the door will not open. The front door will not open. I feel something holding it closed." I took another step back, edging toward him. "We leave. Now." The prisoner leaned closer, his face inches from the bars. His breath fogged the air. There is no leaving. The lights flickered back on. Only half of them. The rest remained dead. But the partial glow revealed a sight that froze my blood. The prisoner was no longer fully inside the cell. His arms were stretched farther between the bars than should have been possible. Not broken, not mangled, simply reaching, stretching, as if his bones had softened. His fingers curled toward me. Too long, too thin, nails sharp like small claws. Lane screamed. I stumbled back, hitting the opposite wall. The prisoner whispered, "Do you see me now?" A sound like bones popping echoed from inside the cell, followed by a ripple of motion beneath his shirt. Something pressed outward along his ribs, pushing against the fabric. Something trying to emerge. The air filled with the metallic scent of blood. Not human blood. Something older. Something wrong. I shouted at Lane, "Get everyone out. Go, now." He ran, calling for the deputies. I stayed rooted in place despite every instinct telling me to flee. I could not turn my back on the cell. I could not let that thing come out behind me. The prisoner pressed his forehead against the bars, and for a moment, just one moment, his expression shifted. Fear. A human fear. "Sheriff," he whispered, barely audible. "Cannot hold it much longer." His voice broke. His eyes flickered between human and something else. "Help me." A shuddering breath tore from him, and his whole body convulsed, muscles twitching under his skin. "It is coming. Cannot stop it. I am sorry." The lights went dead again. Another crack shook the cell door. This time louder. Then a second crack. Then silence. I aimed the flashlight with shaking hands. The cell was empty. The bars untouched. No broken metal. No forced lock. No torn hinges. Just emptiness. It was gone. Lane returned, breathless. "Sheriff, everyone is outside. What happened? Where is he?" I stared into the empty cell. I do not know, because even as I said the words, I felt it. Presence behind me. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Just a presence. Watching. Waiting. And in the deepest corner of the cell block, from a patch of darkness even my flashlight could not touch, came a single whisper. "Sheriff." For a long moment I could not breathe. The whisper that came from the dark corner was not loud, not aggressive. It was soft, steady, and eerily calm. The kind of voice a predator might use when it knows it is close enough that it does not need to roar. I stood perfectly still, flashlight trembling in my hand, my body refusing to move even though my mind screamed at me to run. Lane pressed himself against the far wall, eyes wide as saucers. "Sheriff, did you hear that?" I swallowed, my throat dry. Yes, I heard it. But hearing it and accepting what it meant were two different things. The cell was empty. I knew that. Lane knew that. The door was locked, the bars unbroken. And still the thing that spoke with the prisoner's voice lingered somewhere in that hall. I took a cautious step backward, toward the entrance to the cell block. The darkness behind me seemed to pulse with faint movement. Lane whispered again. "We should leave. We should go right now. The door will open this time, I swear. I swear it will." I tried to sound steady. "We cannot just turn our backs on it. If that thing is loose, if it gets out into the town." He grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. "Sheriff, if you take one more step toward that darkness, I will drag you out of this place myself. I am not dying down here. Not like this." Another whisper floated from the far end of the hall. "Sheriff." It was closer. This time the voice carried a hint of something new. Not the calm of earlier. Not the layered distortion from the transformation beginning. This voice carried intent. Hunger. Awareness. The thing knew we were listening. I raised the flashlight and pointed it at the corner where the whisper had come from. The beam flickered weakly, barely pushing back the shadows. For an instant I thought I saw a shape. Tall, narrow, bent in a way that made my stomach twist. Then it vanished again. The flashlight dimmed further. A cold rush of air brushed past my legs, like something sliding along the floor. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Lane, go get the others. Bring them here. We cannot leave this thing roaming the station." He shook his head violently. Sheriff, half the staff is already outside refusing to come back in. They said the front door slammed shut behind them on its own. Some of them heard things whispering through the walls. They are not coming back in here. I felt the cold tighten around my chest. Then we need help from outside. Call state authorities, tribal police, anyone close enough to get here fast. Lane frowned. The phones are dead. Radios too. I checked them twice. Another whisper drifted from the darkness. Closer. Come and see. Lane's grip tightened, but I pulled away. I stepped back until my shoulders met the doorway frame. It felt safer there, though I knew safety was merely a memory by that point. I forced myself to speak. Listen to me. We are going to move slowly. We are going to go back to the main room. We need to regroup, think clearly, shut off access to the hall, and wait for sunrise. Lane shook his head again. Sunrise is hours away. I know that. What do we do if it comes out here? He looked at me with tearful eyes, fear breaking through every bit of training he had ever had. Sheriff, I think it already has. The air around us grew colder, sharper, as if the temperature dropped another 10 degrees in the span of a single heartbeat. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief instant I saw something move in the darkness behind the bars. Not a person, not an animal, a shape made of shadow and malice. It shifted slowly along the wall, gliding as though it had no weight, no bones, no constraint of form. The prisoner's shadow. Except the prisoner was gone. I whispered to Lane, "Run." He did not need to be told twice. He sprinted toward the main room while I kept the flashlight aimed at the advancing darkness. The shape retreated slightly as the beam touched it, but it did not flee. It waited. It watched. I slowly backed out of the cell block until the heavy metal doorframe separated me from that hallway. I inhaled, reached for the door, and slammed it shut. The echo of the slam rolled through the station like thunder. Harris and Quinn ran toward me from the main room. "Sheriff, what happened? What did you see?" I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. "He is gone." Quinn frowned. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "The cell is empty." Lane cut in, voice shaking. "And something else is in there. Something not human." Harris took a step back. No. We need to leave this building. Right now. We need to get everyone outside." I pointed toward the front entrance. "Try the door." He rushed to it, grabbed the handle and pulled. The door did not budge. He pulled harder. Nothing. He kicked it once. Twice. The metal rattled but would not open. "Sheriff, it is jammed." I swear it was not like this before. A whisper drifted through the station, echoing through the vents and the walls at once. "Sheriff." Every deputy froze. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere. It moved through the building like a ripple, sliding up our spines and down into our bones. Quinn stepped closer to me. "Sheriff, that was not human." "No, it was not." He looked at me, eyes wide. "What do we do?" I swallowed my dread. "We stay together. We keep to the light. We wait until dawn." Lane's voice cracked. "You think dawn will stop it?" I did not answer, because the truth was I did not know. We gathered in the main room, our backs to each other, flashlights pointed into the hallways. Every sound made us jump. Every flicker of the lights brought our hearts into our throats. And through the hours that followed, the station changed. Whispers drifted through the vents. Shadows moved without anything casting them. Objects shifted positions when no one was looking. Something scratched the floor beneath the cell block door. A breathy voice hummed in the dark. And the atmosphere grew so heavy it felt like the walls were sweating fear. One deputy broke down crying. Another refused to open his eyes at all. Harris whispered prayers under his breath. Quinn stared silently at the front door, as if willing it to open. I tried to keep control, tried to stay calm, tried to believe this was all something we could survive. But then, through the faint pulse of the failing lights, I saw movement in the corner of the room. A silhouette, tall, thin, shrinking and stretching with each flicker, watching us from just beyond the glow. Not the man, not anyone human, something else. Lane whispered, "Sheriff, please tell me you see that." I nodded slowly. "I see it." He exhaled shakily. Then what is it? The truth settled on my tongue, heavy and terrible. The curse. And it is no longer bound to the cell. As I spoke the words, the shadow leaned closer, its edges sharp and unnatural, its presence filling the room with a cold that cut straight through bone. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the prisoner had not lied about anything. He had warned us, and we had laughed. There comes a point when a man stops trying to explain what he has seen. Not because the memories fade, but because the truth becomes too heavy to carry in daylight. I learned that on the night the Skinwalker left its mark on our station. And it is only now, so many years later, that I allow myself to put the story into words. Not for the record, not for the department, but because silence has become its own kind of curse. That night did not end the way stories usually do. There was no final confrontation, no moment of triumph. There was only waiting. Hours of waiting in the half-lit room with my deputies pressed close to one another, their backs against the walls, flashlights held like weapons even though we knew they would do nothing. The shadow stayed near the edge of the light. Sometimes it stretched taller, sometimes it crawled low across the floor, sometimes it vanished for minutes at a time, leaving us with nothing but the sound of slow, steady breathing that did not belong to any human lung. Every time the lights flickered, we braced for whatever might come next. And every time they steadied, we remained trapped in the same terrible anticipation. Lane sat on the floor with his hands over his ears, rocking slightly as if trying to drown out the whispers that slipped through the vents. Harris stood behind the front desk, gripping his radio so tight his knuckles went white. Quinn stared into the hallway with an expression I will never forget, as if he had already seen something waiting for him on the other side of the dark. And me. I stood in the center of the room, flashlight trembling, trying to breathe through a fear I could not admit out loud. Just before dawn, the whispers changed. They were no longer coming from the cellar vent or the blocked hallway. They were coming from the cell itself. A single voice repeating something too soft to understand. I stepped closer, and the voice sharpened into clarity. Sheriff. Spoke my title like a memory, like a promise. Sheriff. My breath caught in my chest. Something inside me told me to turn back, to run, to drag my deputies outside whether the door opened or not. But another part of me, a deeper part, knew I needed to see what waited for me. The others watched as I moved toward the hallway. Harris whispered a desperate plea. Do not go down there, please. Quinn stepped forward. Sheriff, he wants you to go alone. Lane looked up from the floor, tears streaking his face. Please do not leave us. Their fear pulled at me, but something stronger was pulling from the other side. Sheriff. The voice came again. I did not enter the cell block. I only stepped far enough into the hallway for the darkness to shift. The faint moonlight coming through the window fell across the floor in a thin silver line. And there, right at the edge of that light, I saw it. A shape, tall, still, its edges flowing like mist, its form changing with each flicker of the lights. It did not step forward. It did not reach for me. It only watched. Then something strange happened. It bowed its head. It was not an apology. It was not respect. It was recognition. As if the creature inside that cell remembered the man I had locked away. The man who had begged not to be confined. The lights flickered again. The shape vanished. When the sun finally crept up over the canyon rim and spilled its warmth through the windows, the station returned to normal in an instant. The cold lifted. The shadows sharpened back into the shapes they were meant to be. The air grew lighter, but not a single one of us pretended the night had been a hallucination. By noon that day, half my staff had requested immediate transfer. Others simply walked out, leaving their badges on the desk. The cell block was sealed off for a week, though none of us could bring ourselves to step inside to clean or inspect it. Maintenance workers refused to enter. Cannot blame them. Eventually I wrote an official report. A neatly typed explanation about an unstable prisoner escaping custody under unusual circumstances. That report still exists, but it is a lie. The truth is something I have kept inside for years. Something I could not bring myself to say until now. The transformation was real. The curse was real. And whatever that man became that night was not something confined to the walls of a municipal station. Over the years, I tried to forget. I tried to convince myself that the nights when I heard scratching inside that cell were only old pipes shifting. I tried to dismiss the moments I saw a tall shadow stand at the tree-line behind the station. I tried to explain away the missing persons near the canyon trails. But fear has a way of preserving truth. Several of my former deputies never recovered. Harris left town entirely. Quinn moved away without speaking a word of goodbye. Lane pretended nothing had happened for months before he finally collapsed during a night shift, claiming he heard a voice whispering his name through the vents. He quit the next day. People in town began whispering about a figure seen in the desert. A tall shape running on two legs one moment and for the next. A creature watching from the canyon ridges, always on nights when the moon was full. And sometimes, late at night, while sitting alone in this office, the old fear returns. The cold settles over the room. The lights flicker. And from somewhere deep in the building, from a place where no one stands, I hear it again. Sheriff. The voice has not aged. It has not changed. It still remembers. And every time I hear it, I feel the same guilt rise in my chest. Because I laughed at him. I mocked the curse he begged me to take seriously. I locked him away believing walls and steel could contain what was waking inside him. I did not understand. None of us did. But I do now. The man claimed he was cursed to become a skinwalker. I laughed. And now, after all these years, half my staff still refuses to enter that cell. Because the thing we locked inside it that night never truly left. And I fear it never will.